Hello and welcome to a special episode of my creative podcast. This episode is going to be all about sewing, in specifically one pattern, the Hinterland dress by Sew Liberated. My name on Instagram is Orchid's Heart, and so if you want to follow me, you'll find me over there. That's where I'm most active. If you want to support my channel through Ko-fi, the link is below. If you want to support the channel by donating one of my wishlist patterns on Ravelry, that's also linked below. Thank you to those of you who made my week last week by doing either of those things. You really put a smile on my face. And so yeah, let me get crack on with talking about sewing the Hinterland dress. So I asked in my last kind of knitting focused podcast, with a bit of sewing in it, whether people would be interested in a video dedicated to all of the Hinterland dresses I have made over the years. I think it's probably my most sewn pattern, and a lot of you said yes, so here I am recording that episode. Yes, so forewarning, the weather in England at the moment is completely mad. 1 minute it's hailing, the next minute it's bright sun, the next minute it's pouring with rain. So I do apologise if it goes from bright to dark a little bit, because that's just where we're at the moment. So yes, hope everyone's doing well. Things are a little bit chaos in my corner of the universe at the moment, but I'm not going to dwell on that. Right on cue, the pouring rain is starting, so it might be getting a bit darker. In fact, I might just quickly open one more blind to let in a bit more light. Who knows if that's made any more difference or not. I guess I'll find out when I edit this. But yes, so where was I? Hinterland dresses. So I think a lot of us that kind of knit, maybe we were sewists first, or we're knitters but we dabble a bit in sewing. I don't know. I was definitely a sewist way before I was a knitter. I've kind of been sewing pretty much all my life, to be honest. But I started in earnest when I was about 15 at school. I think that's when I started making my first garments, but I probably didn't make anything worth wearing or passable as normal clothes until maybe my 20s, mid-20s. It took me quite a while to get good enough and confident enough to start making clothes, and I think discovering Sew Liberated was one of those moments where I really started to get my confidence in making clothes. I think my first Hinterland dress, which is the only one I don't have with me right now because it's in the wash, but I will be showing photos, was probably the first thing I made where I thought, actually this is as good or better than something I've bought, and I felt quite proud of myself. So for those of you who are watching this and you currently can't sew or are very much at the beginning of your journey, I do think this is a really good pattern to practice and learn from. Just more generally, Sew Liberated, their patterns are really good. They're really well broken down into different steps, and I quite like that the majority of them kind of have a way of making them more or less complicated. So hopefully I've already shown an image of what the main product photo for the Hinterland dress is like. I believe they offer you a short sleeve, a 3/4 sleeve and a sleeveless option. You're also offered the option, I think, of 2 different lengths of skirt, and inseam pockets or no inseam pockets, and then with a placket down the front all the way, part of the way, or none of the way. That last one I'm not too sure whether that's a hack or whether that is an option, but if it's not an option, it's a really easy one to do, and I've done it many times. So I think I've made 7 or 8. I think I've got with me right now 3, 1 in the wash, 4, 5, 6, and I did sell one a few years ago, so, well, not a few years ago, a few months ago, 7, so I think I've got 7 dresses I've made and 2 skirts I've made from this pattern. So I've sewn this pattern 9 times. That's quite a lot. I haven't made any crazy mods. Mine are all quite easy and straightforward. I think it's more about, for me, sharing about the pattern, the different easy changes you can make, the changes I make all the time or most of the time, and how one pattern can look so different depending on the different types of fabrics you use. But I do know that for a fee, there is an online course that they offer about hacking the Hinterland dress, and I think that the options you get from that are a lot more drastic, like V-necks, dresses that don't actually end up looking anything like the original dress. It does look quite cool, but I do believe her online courses are maybe in the upper, couple of, I think at least $200 to access. And I'm not saying that that's not worth it, but it's not something that I can afford right now. And to be honest, my sewing experience and journey has been, I kind of muddle through and teach myself things. If I want to do something, like if there was a version of the Hinterland dress I wanted to make, I would work it out. But rather than signing up for a course. But if you do have the funds available to you and you lack the confidence to try and DIY some mods yourself, I would imagine it's a very good course, because my experience with a lot of her patterns has always been brilliant. So, I can't recommend from experience, but I do recommend my experience with Sew Liberated. So anyway, obviously this is not advertised, supported, I don't know, nothing from them. They don't know I'm doing this. I'm just one of many people that really love her patterns and just wanted to share my experience. So the first one I ever made was a blue cotton linen blend Hinterland dress. I'll put the picture up on here. So this is the one that's currently in the wash. So I started out, I think, by looking at my measurements, I made a size 4. I have a 32-inch bust. Now, my only main criticism of Sew Liberated is that I do feel their sizing tends to be on the generous size, and so does the fabric estimations. So the fabric that they kind of recommend you buy for making up the pattern. But there might be a couple of reasons why I find that, which I'll explain in a minute. And so I made a size 4. I used this cotton linen blend, which I bought off eBay in the UK, and the fabric was called Linen Union. I think because it's like a union of cotton and linen. And it does have quite a nice substantial feel to it. I have another item, which I'll show in a bit, made from the same fabric in another colour. And it felt quite tough and kind of substantial, like I said. And so I used that colour, that dusty blue, and I made the dress pretty much straight up as a size 4, no mods. I did the longer sleeve, which is a 3/4 sleeve, the longer skirt, a button placket all the way down the front. I used mismatched vintage mother of pearl buttons for the front, and I put one of my own labels in the back. And the only mod I made was, in the pattern, I think she suggests you cut out your own bias binding or a facing. I'm not sure which, I'm sorry. But I never do either of those things on any patterns unless I absolutely have to. Whenever possible, I bind all of my neck seams and arms in bias binding, which would be easy to see on this one. So as you can see, this is, Hinterland dress. This is a completely different colour. So here, I didn't do it on the sleeves. So yes, I buy bias binding, preferably pretty bias binding. I quite often buy Atelier Brunette, which is a French company, bias binding for my local sewing shop, because it's about £1 a metre, and it's much easier to buy made bias binding than making it yourself, although if you have the right tool, making it yourself is quite easy. I just find it a little bit faffy, and so I prefer to buy it, because when you make your own bias binding from the fabric that you've bought, you have to cut it on a diagonal, and it takes up a lot of space in your fabric, and you end up with quite a lot of wastage if you do it as the recommended sort of layout. I recently had to do that for a Zadie jumpsuit, and because you could see the bias binding on the front, I didn't want to use a contrast bias binding, because I quite like that inside contrast. But this was visible on the front, and I thought it would detract too much from the classic look of the piece. And so I ended up wasting quite a lot of fabric cutting out this strip on the diagonal, which was a bit annoying. You can make bias binding by using a square of fabric and cutting it into strips and sewing it together, but again, that's more faff. If you want to make your life easier, I really do recommend buying some nice bias binding. I do find that the traditional bias bindings tend to be polycotton in pretty horrid colours, but in some places you can get bias binding by Liberty of London, or other nice companies. I used to find it quite easily when I was living in Paris. Up in the north of the city there was a shop called Tissue Run that had a lot of really nice bias binding, and I think that's how I kind of really discovered my obsession with pretty bias. But yes, so that dress, I used a contrast bias binding made from a Dashwood Studio cotton print. That was one I actually made. I had a leftover, I think, 1/4 meter of fabric, and I made the whole thing into bias binding for something else, and so I had quite a bit left over because I made just meters and meters of it in one go, and I used it on that dress because I liked the combination of colours. Now, I discovered I thought it was a bit on the big side for me, although I don't think I really noticed that right away. I think not that long after I was really happy with how that one turned out, I then made this one. And again, I'll try and stick a photo up of me wearing it because I'm sure I've got one. And so this is made from a Viscose by Atelier Brunette, with also Atelier Brunette bias binding, and a label that I've made with my own sort of stamp on. And I think, did I use a contrast fabric for the pockets? No, I've used the same one. And so for this one, I also did a size 4, and I only did the half placket with the buttons down to the waist. And so that just means you've got to make the whole bodice and then attach it to the skirt. Now, I initially loved this dress. It's so drapey, so the difference between the other one, because the fabric is a heavier, stiffer cotton linen, it had quite a lot of structure to it, and this one felt really drapey, a bit more expensive, a bit more sort of classy, whereas the other one felt more like a house dress, or like a doing your jobs, kind of doing the food shopping kind of dress, whereas this one felt more like going out for dinner. And I wore it quite a lot to work when I was a teacher. I really, really, really liked it. Now, a criticism more of the fabric than the pattern, definitely not of the pattern. I actually found that this fabric wore really, really badly. I think this was probably the first time I'd spent more than £20 a metre on fabric. I'm pretty sure it was at least £22 a metre. And let me see if I can show you, but it's, I mean, it completely wore around the cuff to the point that there's holes. It's really badly worn around the neck, which I don't even feel is a high friction point. Like a high friction point, bearing in mind I was teaching and had a backpack on, should have been the shoulders really. But it was like all here, it's gone all horrid and bobbly. And on the back, I don't know if you're going to be able to see, it's incredibly bobbly on the butt. Really bobbly, and I just kind of found that really quickly it just looked worn, and I did wear it a bit, but not enough, I don't think, to warrant the kind of wear. So this one is also the size 4, and so I have been wearing it a bit lately because after this one I started sizing down, and so this one and the blue one are slightly bigger than the rest of the ones I've made. So at the moment, with my bust being a bit bigger and my whole body being a bit bigger, if you're new here, I'm 6 months pregnant, I have still been wearing it, and I've been wearing a jumper over the top so you can't see how badly worn the neck is. So it's more of like a comfortable skirt, because I'm finding skirts with actual waistbands not terribly comfortable at the moment, and this with a higher waist, with a drawstring so you can control how tight it's pulled back, I'm finding more comfortable. But I really don't like the way this is worn. So that's a shame. It is really soft. Maybe on camera it doesn't look that bad, but in real life I would say it does look quite ratty. But I mean, the illustration is probably the difference between the kind of look you would get from like the linen blue one that I showed you before, which was like more kind of worky, and then this kind of sort of pretty floaty drapey one instead. Hopefully you can see that drape. So that was the second one I made, and then I don't know what I made after that. whether it was the other green one or the check one, or one of the two skirts, but I'll show the skirts at the end because that's something slightly different. Yeah, I don't know. I think probably it was the other green one. So, no, I think it was the check one. Sorry, I don't remember. So I think at that point I was a lot more confident about my sewing. I had really discovered at that point the brand Merchant & Mills, and I had decided that the size 4 was slightly too big for me and sized down to the size 2. Now I didn't bother doing that for the whole pattern because I don't think at that point I'd really discovered you could send off these these PDF patterns to be printed on huge sheets, and so I was printing out A4 sheets of paper and taping it together. And so I only printed out the pattern pieces for the bodice, and so I have been using a size 4 skirt all this time, but honestly it's just like a couple of millimeters extra fabric either side. And sometimes, and this is a tip, when I'm laying out all my fabric pieces, another way that I found of saving fabric is I pretty much, if you think of the width of a piece of linen, is generally between 140 and 150 centimetres. The width of the skirt panel is probably just under half that. So sometimes I might just, lay it out and just cut that width in half. And so if the skirt is slightly narrower, it really doesn't matter because it's gathered anyway, so it's fine. And then that kind of saves you having to cut one piece on top of the other because you've used the full width of the fabric for the length of that skirt. I also, what I would do is cut out the bodice pieces, or lay out the pattern pieces for the bodice first on the upper part of the half of the fabric, and then work out how much you've got left. And sometimes that does dictate the length of my skirt, if that makes sense. Maybe I'll try and be snazzy and draw a diagram. That might be more than I'm capable of. If you're laying your fabric, if you were to fold your fabric in half, thinking you're going to cut everything out twice, and your back piece is going on a fold, your front piece maybe isn't because you're doing the placket down the front and you've got all the sleeves and everything on the upper part, and then the bottom part of the fabric you do just the skirt. If it's folded in half, you should be able to see how wide and how long you can do the skirt. That's what I tend to do. Hopefully that's a bit clearer. But yes, so I think the next one I made was this one, which is one of my absolute favourites. This is made from Merchant & Mills linen. I used, yes, because it's got the matching pockets, I used the leftover fabric from the other one to do the pockets. I did make matching bias binding, and I have worn this so much. So much that I've had to mend where my backpack rubs on the neck twice. So luckily, no, 3 times. Luckily I had a bit of leftover bias binding and I saved it for repairs, basically. I don't know if you can see. If not, maybe I'll try and stick a photo in. Where I guess the strap of my bag has worn the neck away twice. Because linen is quite hard wearing fabric, apart from when it's folded. So abrasion wise it's quite good, but because this is on the edge where it's folded, that's where there's a weakness. And that's why it's worn away. And so, yeah, twice I've had to patch it up. And this is where I started doing another modification. I raised the neckline of this one quite a lot. Because I found the scoop neck on the others were a bit low for me, and I wanted to have a higher neck. So I raised the neck. It's still got 3/4 sleeves and the rest of it's the same. But this linen is so soft, I absolutely love it. Yeah, I mean, I don't have much else to say about it. I wear it all the time. And I'm a bit sad that it's probably a bit on the small side for me at the moment. I don't think that one was a size 4. It might be. Hold on, maybe it is. Maybe I can still wear it. Perhaps I'll try it on again later. I assumed it was a smaller size. Maybe it was the one after that I went down a size. maybe I'll put it back on later. We'll have a look. So after that, I decided I was going to make one with an even higher neck, so that I could wear it with a collared Peter Pan shirt. And I'll put a picture in here, which I did. But I made it from a cotton hemp blend fabric from Merchant Mills, which was a bit cheaper because that check linen is on the expensive side. I've recently seen they've increased their prices and it's now hella expensive. I think when I bought it, I mean it was a couple of years ago, it might have been £18 a metre or £20 a metre. It then kind of went up to 24. It looks like it's now gone up to 32. So my love affair for Merchant Mills check linen might be over. Kind of wish they'd announced they were going to go up from £24 to £32 a metre because it's a big increase. And I might have stocked up. Yeah, I'm a bit sad it's gone up that much because I truly love their fabric. But anyway, what was I saying? So I made one from a cotton hemp blend. I did it with a shorter skirt in a green colour and sleeveless so that you could see the shirt underneath. I didn't get on with the feel of the fabric. I liked the dress, but and to make the neck high enough so that you could just see the collar, I did have to lower the neck at the back a bit. So I lowered the neck at the back a bit and then raised the neck at the front a bit, because if I didn't do that I couldn't get it over my head. And so I was kind of cutting a bit out, trying to get it over my head, cutting a bit more, trying to get over my head, and just did it till I could just about do it, so that by the time I'd sewn the binding on and taken that little bit more, I could easily get it off and on over my head. But I didn't really like the fabric, the feel of it. I realised at that point that I'm a die-hard linen person and the softness of linen is unparalleled. So the cotton hemp was a lovely fabric, not as lovely as linen, and that's why linen is like double the price, because it gets softer the more you wear it. It wears really well. Doesn't really hold a smell like when you get hot and sweaty. It's antibacterial, and so it dries really quickly with your body, like any like sweat or anything like that, you know, or if you're somehow get wet for some reason, it dries really quickly, doesn't hold a smell. It's a bit like wool, and it's got quite a lot of really nice natural properties which other fabrics don't have. So I didn't really wear it, and so I did then sell it on to somebody who's hopefully wearing it a lot, which, then meant a bit later I could make, so I'm just checking I haven't got any more behind me, I could make another one in linen. So earlier this year I made this version, and this is from a linen from from Blackbird Fabrics, which is in Canada. At the end of last year they had a sale, and that meant, I think it was 20% off, which meant that the postage, I spent probably like £100 on fabric because I bought enough of 4 garments. And so the money I saved covered the insane postage from Canada, if that makes sense. So I think I end up spent like, if I was thinking I'd paid full price for the fabric, my postage was about $9 Canadian, which isn't that bad. In reality, the postage is something like $35 Canadian, but the money I saved was that difference. I think that makes sense. So my order came to about £100 rather than, I don't know, 140 or 150, whatever it should have been. And so it worked out okay, and I was under the limit for the import taxes. So I made this one in January, which I have to be honest is when I wasn't feeling so good. That was the part of the pregnancy where I was really suffering, the first trimester. And so I made it. It's not my best work, but it's good enough. I put a nice little label in. I used contrast bias binding. I made it sleeveless so I could wear it over a shirt. I did the higher neckline. I think it might be a little bit wonky though. Matching inside pockets. And yeah, that's it really. But this one is definitely the size 2 and it's too small for me at the moment. So I think I probably wore it twice, and I just felt, even back then when I was a couple of months pregnant, I just felt too restricted. It just felt too tight and claustrophobic. So I haven't worn it. But it's there for me to go back to when I'm no longer pregnant, because I would imagine, because these size 2 dresses are still a generous fit on me, well, on my pre-pregnant body, and so I am not worried that I will probably be able to wear them afterwards, because they were a bit too big in a nice way. So if I don't completely go back to the size I was before, I think there will still be space. But yes, so I made this one longer than the other one, because the other one, I think the green one, I made a bit shorter, and I didn't really get on with that length. I think it was just knee length, whereas this is like more of a midi length, which all the others are, which is much more me. And it's 100% linen, so it will get soft with wear, and I think once I am that size again, I will wear it loads. So yeah, I made that one. But in between the 2 green ones, I did make another one, which I've kind of forgotten about. And again, this is where I think you can make something different again. I made this one from a woolen fabric. So this is a woolen blend, and I wanted something that would be warmer in the winter. And so this fabric was on sale. I think I thought it was going to be a different colour when I bought it to when it arrived. And I do feel that it's got slight historical workhouse vibes. Like, it is a bit grey and grungy. And I made short sleeves. So actually, I didn't think I'd made a short sleeve one, but I had. I'm not really sure why for a winter dress. I didn't do the buttons down the front. So if you're not doing the buttons down the front and that isn't an obvious option in the pattern, you just place the front panel on the fold and cut it on the fold rather than 2 separate pieces. So it's an easy hack. It's got, you know, matching internal pockets. And when I first made it, I made it too short and the length really annoyed me, so I didn't really wear it. So I ended up doing like these faux tucks on the bottom, like you see in historical dresses where they used to do that so you could let it out and make it longer as the child grew. I emulated that on this version. Yeah, so that was that one. And so, I mean, hopefully you can see how different the vibes kind of are from making those changes. All very, very different dresses. Oof, that's heavy. And then the last one I made is the most recent one, which I would have shown you in my last episode. And so this one I've made from I think a brushed cotton linen blend from Blackbird Fabrics. In this ochre colour. And I've not worn this one yet because we put the poppers in and they're no good. They just don't stay done up. Like, you barely touch them and they come undone. Like, I barely have to touch it. But you can see I've used some really lovely contrast binding. And this one I've done more like my blue one, in which I've done a straight up size 4 because I wanted this for early postpartum days or next autumn, where I want something kind of cosy and comfortable to wear after I've had the baby. I did want to be able to wear it right now, but I think the reality is by the time I sort out the popper situation, it might be too warm because I started making this in January, and as mentioned, suffering from first trimester illness, it took me kind of a while to finish it. And the only mod I made here was I did much longer sleeves. So this is quite a long sleeve. And for that I just lengthened the pattern piece. I didn't taper it any more than it already was, and I actually found that it was quite a comfortable sleeve width. Hopefully I've put a picture in of me wearing it so you can see, or even a video. And that was the last one I made, and so I did the placket all the way down the front. I did poppers for easy breastfeeding if that's what I want, but at the moment it's totally impractical because it just comes undone really easily. So I'm hoping I can fix that and removing the poppers isn't going to be too dreadful. My partner seems to think it won't be and it will be okay. I'm really nervous and I'm a bit worried I've ruined it. Try not to dwell on that. Because it was quite a lot of work making that in the state that I was in. And you know, the fabric is from Blackbird Fabrics in Canada. I'm not going to get any more of it anytime soon. Wasn't necessarily the cheapest thing. and I kind of wanted to take the place of my mustard Atelier Brunette dress that's kind of looking really worn. Yeah, and I was trying to make myself comfy cozy clothes to wear right now, and that kind of failed because I'm not going to get to wear it. But there we go. That's my 7 Hinterland dresses I have made. But there is something else that I made with the Hinterland dress pattern that I wanted to show you. And that is a type of skirt. So I made 2 of these skirts with these straps. Which is a bit tricky to show you. Hopefully I have a picture I can put in. And this was really simple. So this is made using entirely pattern pieces from the Hinterland dress pattern. Using the pocket pieces, the skirt pieces and the waist tie pieces. That's it. So what I did was I cut out the skirt panel pieces and I sewed up with the pockets as instructed, hemmed it, and then rather than attaching it to a bodice, I folded over the top twice to make a channel for elastic, threaded elastic through and then put a line of stitching over the top to hold it in place. I then made up the 2 waist ties, and rather than leaving one end open, I closed up both ends. And then I put a couple of buttonholes on each end, and then I stitched some attractive buttons on the outside and some ugly buttons on the inside because I wanted the straps to attach inside, not outside. Of course you could, I don't know if my buttonholes are going to be big enough. No. You could do one set of buttons, but then you'd have the strap on the outside, which I didn't want. And, you know, there you go. Then you have a skirt with straps. And I wear these loads, or at least I did before I was pregnant. Unfortunately, I did get bleach on this one, which is a shame. And I made this one from Merchant & Mills fabric. Again, really gorgeous linen. This linen, this colourway is still available, but it's one of the ones that's now £32 a metre. But I think I can make one of these skirts out of 1 metre in my size of Merchant & Mills linen. So it might be that in the future, if I need a Merchant & Mills check linen hit, that this is what I make, because 1 metre is more affordable than 2 metres. And I used some leftover contrast fabric from another Merchant & Mills project. And I used slightly different buttons on this one. And so this one's a bit drapier because this is made from the cotton linen that I made that blue dress from, but in a grey colour. And so you can see that it's a lot more structured and heavy. And so because it's had bleach spilled on it, I could have re-dyed it. But because the pockets are a lovely green floral, it would also dye that, and so I didn't want to ruin the pockets. So this now has become a skirt that I wear when I'm doing slightly messy things but still want to look like me, whereas this one I would wear more when I'm being careful because, as I mentioned, gorgeously soft linen. I don't think there's anything that compares to Merchant & Mills linen, to be honest. It's amazing. Every time I feel it, I'm like, oh, I want all my clothes to be made from it. But there we go, that's my roundup of everything I've made with the Hinterland dress pattern. Let me know if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. I, like I said, love all of her patterns. The only other pattern I made from her lots of times is probably the Aeronite pants. But I've always done the slim hack for those, and I've made 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 pairs. And I've got fabric to remake my favourite pair 2 more times when I'm no longer pregnant. Because again, elastic waists are not something I'm enjoying at the moment. I've made her lichen duster, which you can't see very much of at the moment, twice. And her estuary skirt twice. And her gypsum skirt twice. I made the metamorphic dress once, but she didn't really like the shape that much. What else have I made by her? The strata top twice. And I might make one again. Yeah. I really like her patterns. Let me know if you'd like me to talk about any of those patterns in more depth. I don't think I've made any as much as I've made the Hinterland dress though. I think that really is the one I've made the most because it's such a versatile piece. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. Let me know what you think and if there's anything similar that you'd like me to talk about. Have a good day. Bye.